This next video is to show you how to use guide notes to your advantage, because we talked a lot about guide notes in the previous video, and basically the way this works is, let's say I'm given a note here. That is not a guide note, but I've got a couple of options. If in my mind I'm remembering how to find my guide notes, one of them is on this line, the other one lives in this space here. So I've got choices. To read this note, I can compare it to this line, it's a skip up, or I can compare it to this space, it's a neighbor down. So if I remember this one, which I should, it's C, I know that it's one neighbor down from C, so it's B. If I want to remember it from here, because I'm thinking in this part of the staff, I can remember that it's, I can see that it's one line up, which is a skip over a key. So thinking about G, thinking about the G which lives on this line, I can go up and play the note B. Or thinking about C, I can go down to the line below it and play the note B. This works for any note that you can be given. So here's another note. This one's pretty far away from G, so I'm better off thinking about my C space, which I know is this whole third space. So C touches D. So here's C, and this note I'm reading is the line above C, so it's D. If I wanted to think about this note, we can see here's our guide note G, and here's one line below. We know that line notes don't touch each other on the piano, that there's a key between them, so we know that this E is a skip below the guide note. If we're thinking about this note, that's super easy, it's touching G. So here's G, I'm touching G with the note above, which is A. Here's another note. I've got the note in the space, that's the space below G. So here's G, here's the space below, it's F. Alright, so now if I've got this note, it's not so close to G anymore, but I do remember this other guide note, middle C. And so middle C reminds me that D is the space note directly beside it. So here's middle C, and here's the space note above middle C, which is D. Alright, so all of these notes that I'm using can be easily compared to the guide note that is the closest one. So thinking about the bass clef now, I can remember my guide note lives on the second line. This is an F clef, so this line is F. So if I have a note here, I see they're both line notes. That means there is a note between them. So if we remember F, we go up a line and land on A. And another example, we have F, we can go down to the next line, skipping a space note and landing on the note D. And if we think about this note, it's easy because we know that in the third space, going up or coming down, lives the note C. So our guide note takes up this whole space from one side to the other, and that note is C. So then we can compare this one to a known note. It's very far away from our guide note F, but it's just a skip away. They're both space notes. It's a skip away from C. So here's our guide note C, and we have a line note that we won't play, and then a space note that is written on, skipping over the line. So we can use these guidelines and spaces to help us find every note on the staff. So anytime you're given a note, just quickly think which guide note is it closer to. It's closer to C, that's D. Think about this note, it's touching a guide note, so F is our guide, it's one note up, it's G. Here's a line. This is a very low note. The end of our line and space video for the grand staff, I told you that this was the ground. So this is almost another guide note. Kind of have to memorize that one. Just like this one and this one. So that's it. This is the way you would use guide notes to help you quickly determine all the other notes. But I really do recommend you memorize all the lines and spaces, because that's the fastest way to know any note instantly. So you just know that this is B and D and F and D and E and G and D and A and A. Every one of these notes you should know instantly at recognition by sight.